Hello all, and welcome back to Shatter Our Souls with Novaria, where today I want to take a little bit of a look at the Atlas Corporation as a whole, while also
Hey,
finishing
I've
off
got another job for
the
you. Stop on by.
main quest of the or the Secret Armory of General Nox DLC of Borderlands 1. There's actually a lot of things that can be mentioned in this conversation, so I suppose let's start at the beginning. In Borderlands 1, your primary antagonist is the Atlas Corporation, a mega corporation that, due to circumstances that followed them, became a superpower on Pandora. So, what actually followed them? Well, I suppose their story starts on Promethea. See, at this point in time of this conversation, we have the Dahl Corporation, the Atlas Corporation, we have Hyperion, and you have Maliwan, all kind of vying for the same resources. Mega corporations effectively fighting each other in an arms war with their own privatized military. And a given individual, their, shall we call it the original Vault Hunter, ended up finding, or rather, hitching a ride to Promethea, where he ended up finding, or being part of the expedition that found the first vault on Promethea. The technology held within effectively accelerated the technological growth of Atlas as they reverse engineered Iridian technology to create more powerful than average weaponry and really rocketed them forward in the grand scope of the Borderlands universe. After the Promethea Vault was discovered, each of the varying major corporations all sought out different, we'll call them outer rim planets, places that could potentially house a vault of some variety. This was their goal, this was their hope, to give each individual corporation a chance at holding their own against Atlas, stating outright that Atlas's tagline being something akin to that you are holding the power of the gods in your hand kind of pushes the envelope in the direction of, yeah, these guys were not messing around. Atlas, as well as the Dahl Corporation, ended up finding their way to Pandora. Now, the Pandora Vault, we know what happens. The Destroyer is unleashed, and everything kind of goes upside down for a little bit, right? That's effectively what happens in this particular circumstance. The Pandora Vault is unique in that at the time of Pandora's Vault opening, Atlas had more or less stepped away from Pandora as a planet they were trying to find vaults on, assuming that the wildlife would have kept any sentient life away from Pandora as a whole. And so the Iridian technology was deemed not to be there. This, of course, comes paradoxically to the fact that Pandora is effectively a vault in and of itself. So we got all sorts of goodies here, right? Now, my understanding of how this timeline works out is that Dahl and Atlas sent in research teams. Think groups of about 100, 200 people. The Dahl side of the equation we hear a fair bit about. This side of the conversation follows Patricia Tanis and her expeditions to find the vault key as well as explaining what happened to her dig team. Now, I think this is actually somewhat important, as it showcases that even well-trained researchers, or dare I say, violent criminals, couldn't handle life on Pandora, couldn't handle the wildlife. When they came out of a hibernation of about 40 to 60 years, the version of Pandora that Dahl first arrived on was much more hospitable, much more open-minded than the version that we see in-game. This makes a lot of sense if you break it down, as if the wildlife like the skags and the spider ants and the rack are in hibernation at a time prior to the main game's everything, then it stands to reason that there's more to this discussion. There's more behind what is going on than meets the eye. Now, fast forward a little bit. Atlas and Dahl have more or less stepped away from Pandora. Their belief that there is nothing here kind of shines through. They've abandoned Patricia Tanis. They've abandoned their various workforce on Pandora and just said, okay, cut our losses, clean their hands, and off they go. Got bigger prospects to go for. However, there were two individuals that we need to kind of bring up in this conversation. One is Tanis herself, who eventually gets an understanding that there's more to Pandora than meets the eye, that there is in fact a vault key, and that the vault is real. And this information is somehow gathered and relayed to none other than Commandant Steele. Now, I find it interesting here, because part of what got me on this train of thought actually has to do with Commandant Steele herself. See, Steele is a siren, or one of the 7 sirens of the universe, and the energy or power of a siren is required to be able to power a vault key, or at least the one from Pandora. You witness this in Borderlands 1, where it is Commandant Steele who opens up the vault. You witness this in Borderlands 2, where it is not Commandant Steele who powers it, it's Angel who powers it. And so you end up with now 2 separate circumstances where the power of the vault key is contingent on the use of a siren's abilities. And so, Commandant Steele, having stuck around on Pandora as long as she did, was instrumental in the opening of the vaults, or at least the first vault. Her defeat at the hand of a giant, or tentacle of a giant plate of calamari, was unfortunate. We never really get an idea of what Commandant Steele's capabilities were as a individual nor as a siren. Judging the color of her tattoos being the same as Maya's, I would assume something similar to phase lock. But we never get confirmation of what Steele's abilities were, only that she was a siren and that she had them. So that's great. That tells us absolutely nothing. After Steele's death, we jump forward about 6 months, and Atlas is realizing their mistakes, realizing just how poorly how poor their judgment actually was, leaving behind Pandora in a time where they could have very easily made a profit, or deemed to have made a profit. The vault, after all, was open. The Iridian technology within, theoretically, could be used to bolster their strength and make them a even more devastating or all-powerful entity within the world of Borderlands. So what happened? Why didn't they? Well, in part, this actually comes to 2 points of interest. The first actually has to do with Commandant Steele's falling. See, if Steele had survived, Atlas would be in a very different place by the end of the series than it ends up being. Secondly, we have the conundrum involving General Knox, and by extension, the Crimson Lance as a whole. See, General Knox, after the death of Steele, focused very heavily on a few major tasks. The first major task that was gifted to him was that his primary goal was to eliminate the Vault Hunters that defeated Commandant Steele. This, at its core, being his main objective, has some repercussions. The first and foremost is that Athena, as well as her group of assassins, was sent out to effectively make the most of the situation, to defeat the Vault Hunters that defeated Commandant Steele with ease. That was the hope, at least. But the thing is that Athena's defection was not something that they actually anticipated. And so Athena leaving the Crimson Lance, and by extension Atlas Corporation altogether, was not in the initial cards. And so Athena defecting was the first nail in the coffin to Atlas Corporation's eventual downfall. The second has to do with General Knox. Now, forgive me for saying this, but I believe that General Knox was a far more competent leader than anything that Commandant Steele could do. Knox, in his very brief, let's say 6 months on Pandora, militarized a large portion of the wilderness north of Firestone, created multiple bases, created checkpoints, he created supply lines across Pandora as a whole. His everything hinged on his success as a individual on this particular task. And so General Knox did a lot of heavy lifting. However, we had some issues. Among those issues included the fact that he was in league with somebody. He had somebody to turn to as his direct superior. And the problem is that when you have a individual as dedicated to the cause as Mr. General Knox was, that he became disillusioned with his task. That, as in his own words, he mentions that he was sent orders written in crayon. He was sent orders and had a lack of communication multiple times over. It wasn't for lack of wanting to do the job or following through with what it was that he was originally sent to Pandora to do. The problem he ran into was his superiors, was the people directly above him not being able to fulfill their end of the bargain. So, Knox proceeds to attempt to kill the Vault Hunters. By my count, there were 7 individuals sent to kill the Vault Hunters. 8 if you count Shank. 9 if you count Motorhead. Each of these missions, each of these individuals, were intended to be a greater threat than what came before them. You can't say sending 5 assassins, a bandit leader, and two of your most trusted generals after a ragtag group of thugs wasn't going to do the job. And so we run into the issue of General Knox kind of only had so many options available to him by the end. Ajax failed. No, there was 8. There were 8 other individuals sent. I was forgetting about the, oh geez, what are their names? The first 2 that were on the highway. Ajax is in this region. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. He attempted, with every piece of information that he had, to defeat the Vault Hunters, believing that the fall of the Vault Hunters would mean control of Pandora. And he falls. In fact, he falls quite flat. His success and or failure would lead to either a golden age of Atlas control, or it would lead to an era of Atlas, I suppose, failure. Atlas would fall to pieces. There would be nothing left really to hold what was Atlas together anymore. And so, Atlas began to come apart at the seams. What they didn't expect is that after the Claptrap DLC, Hyperion took the opportunity. They had enough money. They had plenty going for them, that they opted to buy Atlas. Just bought him outright. Now, Atlas at this time was doing pretty okay, but they had a failsafe. Their entire economy at this point was based on the buying and selling of weapons. And, of course, when Hyperion bought Atlas, Atlas weapons were no longer Atlas controlled. There was a failsafe in each of the weapons. Every single one ever created by Atlas had a failsafe so as to never be used against them. When Hyperion took control, every one of Atlas's weapons was no longer in use, no longer capable of being used. It just so happened that the only individual who had a surplus of Atlas weapons was none other than Marcus Kincaid. Now, Marcus in this whole circumstance wanted to turn around and sell the Atlas weapons to the bandits, the individuals across all of Pandora, because that's what he does. He is the middleman through and through. That is what he loves, is making money through other people's suffering. And he is damn good at it. So, why couldn't he turn a profit? The simple fact of the matter is that by the time he had a chance to get ahead, had a chance to sell those weapons, they were as good as useless to him and everyone around him. And so, despite the fact that Marcus bought General Knox's armory in its entirety, means absolutely nothing, because General Knox's armory was effectively a grouping of paperweights. Now, Atlas does make a return in the later games, controlled by a totally different entity. It is not Atlas as we knew it, rather a new corporation by the same name. So for that reason, I kind of want to leave it there. But the fact remains that the Atlas Corporation had numerous opportunities to chart a different course. You see this throughout Borderlands 2, that there were dozens of planets that had vaults. Pandora was not the only one. Outer Rim planets galore had vaults. The big issue that they ran into is that the vaults that were found really weren't found soon enough. That by the time Atlas had a chance at doing anything with their vast wealth and power, it was already too late. That the entire company was effectively overthrown and made into a mockery of themselves. Now, there are a couple other individuals, a couple other groups that I actually really appreciated during a little bit of my research into this. One is actually the Jacobs Corporation. Jacobs is known for being very straightforward. High-power weapons, no elemental effects, just to the point, does the job and does it well. Right? If it takes more than one shot, you weren't using a Jacobs. That is their tagline and they stick to it. Jacobs Corporation found a vault. In fact, hired the original vault hunter to look for a vault and say there wasn't one on their planet, realizing that to gain a vault under their control would inevitably eat away at the reputation of Jacobs, but also would cause undue stress on their planet that was their home base, which I honestly think is a pretty noble cause. They're pretty lawful good if we're being honest. They're not as corrupt as some of the individuals and groups out there in Borderlands. In fact, far from it. And so, I think they do deserve a pass. Atlas falls into the lawful evil. They say and do what they need to do because they believe that it is their right, that it is the right course of action, that they are saving lives by doing this. And in that regard, I think Atlas is misguided at absolute best, and outright vicious at absolute worst. Hyperion, being the ones that take over, kind of makes sense. If we're being completely honest, the circumstances surrounding the pre-sequel and Borderlands 2, focusing very heavily on the Dahl and Hyperion corporations, really showcases that they did want to do more with this particular group, and that it just so happened that Dahl and Hyperion had a bit more work to do overall compared to some of the other individuals out there. Anyways, with that being said, we've taken down the last of the Assassins groups, and we've got a couple side missions that I want to complete while we're out here. One of them is Bugged. Now, the Bugged side quest was effectively, hey, get this transmitter, hook it up to one of their satellites so that we can gain a unfair advantage in future battles against them. And given that this is coming from Athena, it really does make sense. Athena is an incredibly strategic and tactically minded individual. What I like about this particular side quest actually has to do with the fact that Athena does what she's always done. She is and always has been an assassin. She has been incredibly good at being a hired gun, a killer, if you will. Her entire goal in being your confidant, being your helper in this endeavor, is to get back at the individuals who took such a large portion of who she was for granted, and by extension took away from the people that she cared for. This gave Athena a bit of a... I don't want to call it an ego. I don't believe ego has any place in that discussion. But she had a craving for vengeance, something that the average character in Borderlands seems to always have. But she wanted to effectively start fresh. by having Athena as your main confidant, you're one of the main individuals in this DLC, you get to learn more about Atlas and their inner workings. And one of the things that always caught me off guard and seemed out of place was the fact that Atlas Corporation, by and large, opted not to protect their assets. Instead, used assets until the moment that they were deemed either unnecessary or irrelevant. What I like about this particular moment, this style of, I suppose, conversation around the mega corporations, is that every single one of them does it. Whether or not a corporation would acknowledge it. Atlas was just one that was more open about it, more talkative about it, said what they felt needed to be said and did what they felt was necessary. And the reality of this circumstance, this belief that they have, is that Atlas became, I don't want to say that they became less as a result of it. It was clear that what they had accomplished through the use of their varying technology, their varying capabilities, was incredible, was almost non-replicatable. But non-replicatable does not mean ideal. If it were my personal opinion, assets need to be protected. I believe that Athena should never have been thrown away, should never have been taken advantage of. But this is coming from an individual who wants to believe in people first and foremost, above everything else. So Athena being the individual that they end up talking about to a grander degree, and her story being tied directly to the story of this DLC, makes sense. The fact that someone that was taken advantage of was used by Atlas showcases exactly what this world had turned to. What greed, what power have turned people into. This is part of the reason why I believe on an individual level that corporations have no say in, or should not have a say in, the housing market. Why corporations should keep away from things like politics. Because what is good for a corporation is not good for humanity. And we see this time and time again where corporations are to be held liable in legal systems, but what can be done about a corporation? It is an entity that is not a singular person. And so you end up with people doing shady things because that's what they need to do for said corporation without being without an adequate amount of onus on the individual. This is how I'm going to word it. And to some extent, I do believe that that is one of the greatest faults and failures of our system. That we ended up in a circumstance where corporations cannot be held accountable, at least not to nearly the same degree that they seem to want to hold individuals to. Corporations in Borderlands take full advantage of the fact that they are independent, that they are not liable or held accountable by any government organization, that they are going from planet to planet, harvesting whatever they can for the sake of their progress, their financials, their what have you. Because who's gonna stop them? The Vault Hunters? How are 4 people supposed to stop an entire corporation, entire military, from achieving their goals? Now this is something that I kind of find funny, because they absolutely do achieve what they're aiming to do 9 times out of 10. That one odd time that they don't, well, we don't talk about that very often now, do we? Okay. Wow. We only have one major mission left, I guess. We've completed the Lost Loots mission, which requires the use of the Lancer, the most inefficient vehicle in terms of transportation. And it also requires the use of a rather small piece of technology that is more like a ground-penetrating radar. So cool, we got that going for us too. But given that we're here, we're only about 30 minutes in and I've got a little bit of time to kill. So, onward to General Knox. Now, to be very clear, General Knox is a character that is going to be defeated more often than any other individual boss in the entire game to this point. Because General Knox is not held to the same rules as other individuals. Now, to put it bluntly, some entities, some bosses, only show up for a certain duration of time. For example, you could say that some bosses like Mothrak are not easy to farm because they'll show up once, I believe, and never show up again. The one that comes to mind as completely unusable as a harvesting location or a, what's the word, weapon grinding location is Mad Mel, as a boss who absolutely will not respawn no matter what you do. But the thing is that most bosses in Borderlands 1, while they can and often will respawn numerous times over, there's really nothing that stops you from fighting them time after time after time. General Knox, however, is easily one of the most devastating in the grind till you drop category, as General Knox has not one, but 3 missions directly tied to his defeat. Each of them focuses in on a extension of the same set of missions. The first is the main story side, where of course we gotta follow through with the main story and complete it to the best of our abilities. Once the main story is completed, congratulations, you have beaten the DLC as a whole. You gain access to a couple of side missions, and you're good to go, right? Ooh, excuse me. So, why does he get 3? Well, Marcus, after buying the armory of General Knox, opts to have a little bit of fun and get a few things out of the way. See, where other people would see a liability, Marcus sees opportunity. And so, in his mind, the easiest way to keep what he has bought, keep what he controls, was specifically to be able to use, whatchamacallit, to prevent the Crimson Lance from fighting back. And so, he sends in a mission where he forces you to fight against the Crimson Lance and defeat 10 of each individual type of Crimson Lance trooper. After bringing back proof that you have defeated X number of Crimson Lancers, congratulations! You are more than welcome to go back to the armory and loot it once more. After all, he more or less had an entire armory dropped at his feet. He has cash to burn, and he has weapons to and he has enough weapons that he can literally give them away. It's a means to an end for him. He sees your strength, your capability, and your drive to defeat the Lance as a means of getting rid of a greater evil. And let's be real, you've been working with him for how long? You are no longer a problem for him. You are another money-making opportunity for good old Marcus Kincaid. So, of course he's going to want you to help him out. And pay you handsomely for it. Your greed precedes you, after all. But the thing is that there's more to it. Because after clearing out the Lance, who's the next most likely individuals to want to rob the single largest weapon cache on Pandora? Well, it'd be the Banditos, wouldn't it? So he sends you back out into the Badlands, as it would be, or as it were, to fight another X number Banditos to complete the same task a third time. And once you have defeated all of the Banditos, he sends you back to the armory and says, hey, I got money to burn, I have weapons to set aside, and you've got 3 minutes to grab as much as you can carry. You've already done him so many favors, it's only natural he would want to support you. And so, you do so again. Marcus, as a result, ends up being very heavy-handed in the latter half of this DLC. There is, of course, another side mission that I actually really enjoy, and it is the Circle of Duty. Now, where in the main game, you had the Circle of Slaughter and the Circle of Death. One focused on fighting skags, the other focusing on fighting bandits. The Circle of Duty focuses exclusively on the newest enemy types, the good old wonderful Crimson Lance. Your goal? Defeat as many Crimson Lance as you can. Showcase that you can defeat an enormous number of them in quick succession, and you get paid the big bucks. That's more or less what it is. 3 to 5 rounds of just fighting Crimson Lance. And as far as arenas go, this is actually one of the ones that I like a fair bit. This particular arena focuses so heavily on character development and focuses in on... Oh, wait. Hang on a moment.
Well, that's just inappropriate timing. I got tired of waiting. It was open to be dead before you got here. I can't stand this place. Make you a deal. If you best me in this fight, which seems likely, maybe you could just blow the planet up entirely. Kill all of them. That's the fairest thing to do.
Wow, does he not like Mondays? Anyways, the other arenas that you come across throughout the entirety of Borderlands 1 focus in on you have an enemy type, fight him, beat him up, whatever. Do as you see fit. And in that endeavor, they actually do a fairly good job of showcasing that each enemy type, while they might have a basic approach to defeating them, think the Skags versus the Alphas versus the... Elemental Skags. Each of them has a slightly different approach to how they function overall. That makes each Skag variety more dangerous than some might think them to be. In this case, the Crimson Lance gets a exceptionally large number of tools at their disposal. The first, and most interesting in my mind, is that they are given They're basic, they're badass, and they're elemental variants all together. And this includes also the medics, to be clear. Effectively, this particular DLC mission focuses very heavily on efficiency. Efficiency, which I, as a player, as an individual, greatly struggle with. Especially when I have to run halfway across an arena into active gunfire to do so. But the thing is that they are afforded many more opportunities than your average arena ever did. The one for the bandits, for example, the hardest mission was, I think it was like half the length of the second round of the Circle of Duty. Based on my recollection anyways. They end up being significantly weaker because of A, when you deal with it, and B, because the Circle of Duty is expecting that you have already beaten the main game, whereas the Circle of Slaughter did not. It focused in on a mid-game reaction of sorts. It expects you not to be at your best. It expects you to battle as another average player, so to speak. You're not expecting to be the next Chuck Norris, right? You are expected to battle as if it were a mid-tier battle against other gun-wielding foes. That is it, that is all. So they do actually do a lot with the DLC's post-game. I wouldn't say it's extravagant, but given that most of the DLC's post-game focuses very heavily in on a pair of reasonably difficult missions, I think it's fair to say that the General Knox DLC does post-game better than any of the other DLCs in the base game of Borderlands 1. Or base Borderlands 1. However, post-game is only starting at this point. There is one other mission. One other task. Which I'm pretty sure you know exactly what I am referring to. A creature of immense strength, a powerhouse, an entity that could very easily have challenged the Destroyer and lived. You know exactly what it is. Cromarax the Invincible. Now, why Cromarax? What's going on with that? So, effectively, Cromarax is a heavily evolved and increasingly large shellfish from an ancient sea or what have you. As a giant crawfish, he has a shell that is near impervious to damage. And so, he as an individual is intended to be the final task of sorts, and can only be battled after the destruction of the Vault of General Knox. What this effectively means is that Cromarax the Invincible acts as your final challenge. But more than it just being the final challenge of the run, it is also by far and away the biggest run ender in the entire, I suppose, first game. See, this entity is so powerful that it can, and easily will, one-shot any of the Vault Hunters at any level. It is always level scaled a minimum of 4 levels above the host of the game. Meaning that, yes, theoretically, if you had a 4-person team and a low-level host, you could theoretically out-level Cromorax. It's unlikely. It is an incredibly powerful entity and definitely does not like the idea of being weak, so to speak. Oh, that's just great. Well, no more looting for me, I suppose. But more than any of that, we also have to acknowledge the fact that Cromorax is the first ever raid boss. It is not intended to be fought in any capacity prior to beating the game a second time. Effectively leveling up to about level 50-ish and fighting the Destroyer a second time on the profile. So in that regard, Cromorax is already leaps and bounds ahead of other entities in Borderlands 1. So why is he such a late game everything? What is it about Cromorax that gives it the edge comparatively to other beasties? Well, short version is it's ancient. It is incredibly all-powerful, and in fact, it is quite likely a vault beast in and of itself that could have, theoretically, been part of what destroyed the environment of Borderlands 1 as we understood it to begin with. But that is a theory for another day. For now, if you will, or if you don't mind, we are going to enjoy yet another cutscene. 4, 3, 2, 1, and... And Athena had her revenge. So, I am just going to take this moment, hand in any and all side missions that have been completed, and then we're going to sign off for today. But the reason I want to bring this up, and the reason I brought it up, is because I do believe that Cromorax as a entity, that really all of the invincible enemies end up being so because they are uniquely powerful, uniquely capable entities. Okay, new missions available at the T-Bone Junction Bounty Board. Fantastic. And this leads into what would unironically be the hardest batch of missions available, including one very lovingly called You Will Die. You Will Die is defeating Cromorax solo. And Marcus is going to hand us the first of his various side missions. Anyways, if you like what you see, I would greatly appreciate if you could drop a like, maybe a subscribe, a comment. Have at it. I would greatly appreciate it. Until next time, take care of one another, be safe out there, and I hope to see you all again soon. Until then, I hope you all have a good one.
The warehouse you blow up. You'd be amazed at how much I managed to salvage. If you do some work for me, I'll let you have a little shopping spree. What do you say?